Bienvenidos a Real Estate Management Tech, REMTech 2020, el encuentro online para los players del Commercial Real Estate de América Latina. En este encuentro vamos a debatir y aprender cómo la tecnología está impactando y puede hacer más eficiente la gestión, administración y financiamiento de las carteras de activos inmobiliarios. REMTech 2020 es el lugar para aprender de los expertos a través de un programa de conferencias con más de 40 speakers regionales e internacionales. Es el espacio para comprender las mejores prácticas y para poder debatir en el foro y justamente poder hacer networking entre todos los asistentes del evento, para conocer nuevas soluciones tecnológicas que sin duda te ayudarán en tu negocio. Los invito a disfrutar de este encuentro. Bienvenidos a Real Estate Management Tech.
Hello, Latin America. I am Antony Slumbers, and I'm delighted to be talking at the Real Estate Management Tech Conference. I'm going to be talking about real estate, BC and AC, before and after coronavirus. We're going to look at technology. We're going to look at the rise of AI and its impact on real estate, space as a service in the office market, business models, retail and industrial assets, and then how coronavirus is upending everything. First, let's have a recap of what was happening before coronavirus. Well, some things were very much the same. Technology wasn't sleeping and Moore's law was cracking on as ever, which is how we get to these numbers. These are the number of transistors on a CPU, a computer's central processing unit. So we had 100,000 in 1980, 10 million in 2000, and then just 16 years later, 10 billion. That's exponential growth for you. And what happens with exponential growth? Well, you get to big numbers, doubling them becomes a really big deal. In fact, we have been more than doubling recently. This is the Cerebras WSD GPU, or graphical processing unit, that was announced in late 2019. And this has 1.2 trillion transistors on it. So 100 million to 10 billion in 16 years sounded impressive, but not as impressive as 10 billion to 1.2 trillion in just 3 years. But even that is not as impressive as this. This is the growth in the amount of computational power available to run AI systems. And this has doubled every 3 years, every 3.5 months between 2012 and 2018. So a computer scientist had 300,000 times as much computing power to work with in 2018 than just 6 years earlier. I call this the Trinity of Transformation, where we are seeing huge increases in data and computing power and great advances in algorithm design, especially within deep learning. And this is having great consequences. There is a so what of speed. McKinsey wrote this in 2017. Overall, we estimate that 49% of the activities that people are paid to do in the global economy have the potential to be automated by adapting currently demonstrated technology. And that is now nearly 4 years ago. So we have been moving to an AI everywhere world. Eric Brynjolfsson and Andrew McAfee, both of Harvard, wrote in the Business Review in 2017 that artificial intelligence, especially in machine learning, is the most important general purpose technology of our era. Now, the importance of this is in those 3 words, general purpose technology. Most technologies are point solutions that solve one particular problem, but a general purpose technology is one that is pervasive. The internal combustion engine is a general purpose technology. Electricity is a general purpose technology. The internet itself is a general purpose technology. So we can expect to find AI embedded in applications throughout business and across society. And this means AI is set to have a huge impact on real estate because the nature of work is changing. Anything structured, repeatable, or predictable will be automated. That is the 49% of all tasks referenced by McKinsey, which means we need to be thinking, what is it that us humans will be doing? Fortunately for us, there is something missing from structured, repeatable, predictable, and that is creation. We may not be Michelangelo, but for something to be structured, repeatable, predictable, it needs to be created in the first place. And fortunately for us, machines are not very good at creation. In fact, Picasso had it right. Computers are useless. They can only give you answers. And that is the point of humans. We are here to ask the right questions. So if you think of it like this, anything structured, repeatable, predictable will be automated. So think of that as old work, but new work is what humans are good at. So humans are good at design, imagination, inspiration, creation, empathy, intuition, innovation, abstract and critical thinking, collaboration, social intelligence, judgment. An office that is designed around old work is, or shortly will be, obsolete. The future-proof office has to be designed for new work. Offices must catalyze human skills, which is why the real estate business is no longer about real estate. The value of real estate rests into what degree it can catalyze human skills. Because ultimately, no business wants an office. They want a productive workforce. And technology has, paradoxically, made this ever more important. It has changed the purpose of the office as not somewhere to do technological things, but as somewhere to be the best humans we can be. Our value, or at least the value of most of us, rests on our human, not our technological skills. Which means Winston Churchill's comment of 1942 has never been as important as it is now. We shape our buildings, and afterwards, our buildings shape us. Which is how we get to space as a service, which I like to describe as real estate, but better. In fact, the space as a service market is going to go from being a niche, as it is today, to being the norm. Flexible working will be the defining characteristic of the future workplace. What space as a service is doing is refocusing the industry around people, putting humans at the center of the real estate industry. And improving the pleasure or the productivity of people is the core value proposition. Within retail, we want customers to experience genuine pleasure. And in the workplace, we want, again, customers to be as productive as they can be. Because people are much more valuable than real estate. The World Green Building Council wrote a few years ago that for every $3 you spend on utilities, you spend 30 on rent, but 300 on people. So we should be designing our spaces and places to support our existing customers, or design them specifically to attract the sort of customers we want to attract. And the way to enable greater pleasure or productivity is by creating a great user experience. In this way, space as a service can unbundle income from the amounts you charge to rent your space by the square foot or meter. You are not selling space. You are selling a great user experience. You are selling pleasure or productivity. And this improved user experience will translate into higher utilization and satisfaction among your customers. And that will secure your long-term income better than a long lease will do. Space as a service is a human plus machine game. You need a lot of technology and a lot of human skill. But in the longer term, according to the head of advisory at the Altus Group in September 2020, properties without a flex component will be valued less. And by way of understanding how valuations are likely to change, Cushman & Wakefield put out this report again in September, explaining how they believe income will be split into tiers. First of market rent, but secondly of additional service-driven income, with each capitalized at a different rate to reflect different risk profiles. What we have learned with the flex or space as a service market is that getting your business model right really matters. The WeWork debacle over their flotation last year stands as a mighty warning on this front. Flex space is often delivered under a lease arbitrage business model, but there are two fundamental problems with this approach. The first revolves around incentives. Under a lease arbitrage model, the landlord, investor, operator, and occupier each have incentives pointing in different directions. Essentially, one simply wants to charge more and the other wants to pay as little as they can. So instead of collaboratively aiming to provide a premium user experience to their customers, these mixed incentives simply lead to a tug of war in terms of who gets how much of a finite pot of money. The aim has to be, as we discussed earlier, maximizing the pleasure or productivity of customers. That is the way to generate the highest income, the shortest voids, and the optimum use of any space. Unless incentives are aligned, this simply will not, cannot happen. Now, this is not the way real estate tends to operate. But in this new world, where you are delivering a service rather than selling a product, it is the way it has to work. The second fundamental problem with the lease arbitrage model involves risk. Simply put, in most situations, the risk involved with operating flex space in this way are too high. Operators have limited or no ability to flex their own operations to suit market conditions, and landlords or investors are kidding themselves that the leases they signed with any operator are worth the paper they are written on. Just look at the number of spaces where, for instance, WeWork and IWG are reneging on lease agreements. And again, for occupiers, for customers, having the landlord and operator fight hardly leads to the best user experience for them. As with incentives, risks need to be aligned. You cannot mostly create great services structured like we so often have done in the past. We need to operate flex space under a different business model. In the best of all possible worlds, the operator and the owner would be one and the same. But this is unlikely to happen in reality, apart from a few standout situations. Mostly, an owner would be best served by working in partnership with one or more operators, different operators to suit different customers. Deals must be structured so that the underlying asset is still tradable without losing the operator. The value of an asset will increasingly be tied to the brand under which it is operated. At a technical level, data from all assets should be interoperable. You need to understand what works where and what does not. Open and joined up data is vital. It will make sense to either be big in this market, where you can serve the needs of larger corporates, or to be a niche operator, where you understand the requirements of your customers in a highly detailed, granular way. But however you choose to operate, you must own the relationship with your customers. Many landlords are going to lose their relationship with the occupants of their assets. This will leave them as the providers solely of dumb space. They will be commoditized. Don't be commoditized. So that is the office market. What about other asset classes? Let's start with retail. The most important thing to understand about the future of physical retail is that it is not just or even primarily about shopping. There are certain boxes you have to tick to have a successful physical retail asset. You must be a destination, somewhere outstanding that people simply love to visit, that makes it worthwhile getting up off the sofa and ordering online. Or you must be a fulfillment center, a space that helps online retailers get their product into customers' hands easily and quickly. The last mile to the customer has great problems and great value to those who can help make it happen. Or you must be amazingly well-tuned to local particularities. You must understand the local market at an exceptional level, where you have the products or services that are irresistible to your local audience. Few retailers are capable of this, but many independents are. Local knowledge is often the competitive advantage of independence. Or you must be retailers of cheap and everyday products, products that are not bought online, or products with very short shelf lives. But whichever of these four you are, you need to be operating in a data-rich way. The only retailers that will survive will be those that collect, analyze, and operate on great data about their customers. Overall, expect to find less but better physical retail. There will be a lot of obsolescence in this market. Now, all of this is usually not the domain of real estate people, but it needs to be, because you need to understand, you need to ensure that your customers, the retailers, understand this, because only those that do will thrive. If you want to minimize letting to retailers likely to fail, then you need to pay attention to all of this. The way to think about physical retail is that it used to be the means of distribution for getting products to people, but it no longer is. The new reality is that physical shops are a customer acquisition cost. They will increasingly become places where retailers inspire future customers, learn about their needs, and then service those needs online with one platform to operate online and offline. And coronavirus has turbocharged the adoption of online, as we have all seen over the last 9 months. Not all of this will remain after coronavirus, but it is likely that much will. So the dynamics of your customers' businesses will be changing rapidly. How many can make physical stores work financially when 25% or more of their sales are online? Which moves us nicely to look at industrial real estate, the great winner out of coronavirus. But how the market has changed. Industrial used to be the ugly duckling of real estate, but it has moved from being about dumb sheds to home of the robots. And so much of the market today is focused on that last mile issue for online retailers. But the market is highly fragmented, at least it is in the UK and Europe. To work well as logistics as a service, providers, they need very many assets and a great deal of data. It is no surprise that Blackstone have been spending huge sums to build consolidated networks. The form factor of industrial is also changing. We are seeing the rise of urban farming, using vertical rather than horizontal assets, as well as the growth in dark kitchens, cold storage, and robotic warehouse as a service, as delivered by the likes of Fetch Robotics. Potentially, coronavirus could see a lot of manufacturing being repatriated. Long and brittle supply chains have been shown to be a weakness during the pandemic, and perhaps the rise of industrial scale 3D printing. But the problem for the real estate industry is though, where do they fit into all of this? Most of the value is in the services not provided, not the box that houses them. The industrial real estate sector needs to think hard about how they can provide services as well as pure real estate. More value is being created than ever before, but who is capturing it? So that was where we had got to BC, before coronavirus. Now let's look at what has happened AC, after coronavirus. Well, coronavirus actually has hijacked the stage. This year's play in real estate was going to be climate change and sustainability, but now it's COVID-19 all the way down. Or so it seems, as the world comes to a halt, the streets empty, and we all remain largely at home. In reality, our response to the coronavirus will, indeed has to, place sustainability at the core of a flywheel of change that represents the greatest opportunity the real estate industry has seen in decades. To deal with one, we have no choice but to deal with the other. Without hyperbole, we have a moral obligation to not waste a serious crisis. We now have the chance to do things that were not possible before. We have to seize it. The global pandemic is acting like a forcing function in real estate, as across wider society. The future is being compressed, time is being fast forwarded, and 5 to 10 years change will now take place in the next 12 to 18 months. Has a moment ever felt so Darwinian? It is not the strongest species that survive, nor the most intelligent, but the ones most responsive to change. The world has messed up big time, and this time it's serious. So what would have been this year? Well, Larry Fink, the CEO of BlackRock, which has over 7 trillion US dollars of assets under management, set the tone for the year in January. His annual letter to shareholders was entitled A Fundamental Reshaping of Finance and has the subheading, Climate Change is driving a profound reassessment of risk, and we anticipate a significant reallocation of capital. He goes on to write about how climate change will impact bonds, whether 30 years mortgages are possible in many areas, most at threat from rising sea levels, how insurance may become unobtainable for many, and the impact on inflation and interest rates if the cost of food climbs from drought and flooding. And then he nails his financial thinking to the mast. Investors are increasingly reckoning with these questions and recognizing that climate risk is investment risk. Now, last year he wrote, a company cannot achieve long-term profits without embracing purpose and considering the needs of a broad range of stakeholders. Ultimately, purpose is the engine of long-term profitability. Now, this received a great deal of attention and much tub thumping, but frankly, climate risk is investment risk is 100 times more powerful. When the man at the helm of a powerhouse like BlackRock says, our investment conviction is that sustainability and climate integrated portfolios can provide better risk-adjusted returns to investors, the writing is on the wall. Now, demographics is also about to impact on the subject. Demography is destiny. Millennials aren't so young anymore. In fact, they're up to nearly 40, and they are moving into corporate positions of power. Now, whilst most millennials are X, Y, or Z comments are trite nonsense, it is true, according to a large Deloitte study, that as a group, the under 40s do put more weight on improving society than generating profit. Most likely because they have to live with the consequences. Either way, again, as pointed out by Larry Fink, the world is currently undergoing the largest transfer of wealth in history, 24 trillion US dollars from baby boomers to millennials. As wealth shifts and investing preferences change, environmental, social, and governance issues will be increasingly material to corporate valuations. All of which indisputably means that an industry responsible for 1/3 of global greenhouse gas emissions and that consumes 40% of all the world's energy has not only no choice but to take this seriously, but is going to be under the most intense scrutiny over the next 10 years. There will be some carrots used, but if the industry does not comprehensively up its game, then very many very large sticks will also be used. Indeed, these are already being used, with New York City mandating that large buildings above 25,000 square feet, so not even that large, should reduce emissions by 40% by 2030. Not that surprising perhaps, as what do we expect when the real estate industry is responsible for 66% of greenhouse gases in the city. So the scene was very much set for sustainability to be a key talking point, at least within real estate. When the money is worried about preserving wealth, you can be certain the rest of the industry has no choice but to take note. But taking note does not necessarily mean action. The real estate industry, especially during the good times, is highly skilled at taking note rather than action. So what will be? In evolutionary biology, there is a theory called punctuated equilibrium. This holds that instead of slowly evolving over time, when evolutionary changes occur, they happen rapidly and suddenly. Species split into two distinct species rather than one species gradually transforming into another. In a less dramatic, but I believe equally transformational way, this is where we are in the world of work and the office. The way things were in February must now be considered history. Everything has changed. However long it takes to get through the current pandemic, we are not going to return to the world as it was. And hard though it may be to believe right now, that is a good thing. We have an opportunity to do things we thought were not possible. two zeitgeist-changing things have occurred. First, we have been forced to realize that being inside in confined spaces with many other people potentially exposes each and every one of us to illness or worse. Our buildings can harm us. Secondly, across the globe, we have been part of the largest behavioral experiment in history. In a matter of days, the knowledge economy went from being 95% office-based to being 95% home-based. And the results of this experiment? Well, with caveats, working from home works. In this example of how being inside can harm us, 9 people in a restaurant caught the coronavirus thanks to the placement of an air conditioning unit. In this well-publicized example from China, we saw how spending hours together in an unventilated space led to dozens of employees catching COVID-19. The workplace acted as a petri dish. Now, we have known about the impact of environmental conditions for a very long time, but largely we have ignored the issue. Today, we no longer can. However, we are lucky in this, because whilst we now need to take a close interest in the environment around us for health reasons, it just so happens that we will benefit from the productivity gains and financial returns that follow from working in optimized conditions. Put simply, humans' cognitive ability is maximized by being in spaces that are healthy. It's taken a pandemic to force us to do what we should have been doing anyway. This is a slide from a presentation given by the Shanghai-based but Canadian-led standards company Reset. As you can see, it is a known that cognitive function decreases above certain CO2 levels, and the same with increases in VOCs, volatile organic compounds. Increases in particulate matter 2.5 lead to increased risks of lung cancer and strokes. And there is much more in this vein. Without knowing the quality of the air in any office you go into, you are frankly endangering yourself. Pre-pandemic, that danger might just have been feeling a bit drowsy in a meeting. During a pandemic, it might mean rather more. Now, there have been many surveys done asking how people are getting on working from home, but Leesman, who have been conducting workplace surveys for over 10 years, probably is the best. By August 2020, they had conducted 126,000 plus individual surveys. Now, in their standard survey, they always ask people whether their workplace enables them to work productively. As you see here, nearly 20% more people say their home office enables them to be productive than their office. Across many variables, the home office wins. For private conversations, for business confidential discussions, for thinking and creative thinking, for reading, in each case, the office comes second. The same applies for mobile computing equipment, for Wi-Fi, for remote access to files, and for telephony. Home office wins. Where the office wins is not at all surprising. Space to spread out, learning from others, informal social interaction, and of course, hosting visitors, clients, or customers. And again, not surprisingly, offices tend to have better chairs, desks, fixed computers, wired connectivity, and printing capabilities. But what's so striking is how easy it would be to update the home office with decent chairs and desks, leaving the office only really of value for collaborative uses. And this is not even a function of age, as so many commentators wrongly assume. In the eyes of employees, the home office beats the office across all age bands. But where the home office fails, and fails badly, is when someone has to work in a non-work specific location, such as the dining table. Productivity drops badly in such circumstances. Within the Leesman data, this applied to circa 25% of people. Now, given the above, it is therefore no surprise that survey after survey shows that there is a clear desire amongst knowledge workers not to return to the office 5 days a week. Professor Nicholas Bloom of the Stanford Institute for Economic Policy Research conducted a large survey in May 2020, and he found that 25% of people wanted to work remotely full-time, and 20% wanted to be in the office full-time. For the rest, a standard bell curve distribution is likely, with most people likely to work in the office 2 or 3 days a week. Now, who wants what is driven by a few core factors. The longer the commute, the higher the desire for remote becomes. Good public transport makes a big difference. Age matters. Younger employers are more desirous of buzzy offices, having access to senior colleagues, and for the after-hours social life. Those with children or older, less social types are more bothered about just getting things done. Job task and type is critical. How much of someone's job involves collaborative or individually focused work? In each case, they need a space that best enables the work they do. Character also matters. To a large degree, offices are for extroverts. In many instances, offices work far less well for introverts than extroverts. And overall, people work best when they are given what Daniel Pink described as purpose, autonomy, mastery. Having flexibility to work in many different locations goes a long way to providing this. So for companies, distributed work also has many advantages. The last 6 months has shown most companies that most of what they do can be done away from the office. But it's also made clear what would be best done in an office. So cutting the total amount of space they occupy by 10 to 30% would seem to be relatively easy to do. Savings from smaller HQs could be simply banked, but that would not be wise. Reassigning the savings to better space or local space for employees and stipends for higher home office costs would be better. Rethinking real estate needs from end to end would be best. Planning around hub, home and roam, where employees can make best use of whatever space they need, wherever they need it, would be the optimum. Less but better, less but better. Corporates working with distributed teams also have the potential to benefit from far larger talent pools. There is a huge difference in the availability of talent that only needs to be in HQ 1 or 2 days a week, as opposed to 5. And as we have seen, a well thought out workplace strategy will lead to happier, healthier, more productive employees, as well as providing the flexibility to scale up or down as needs be. That is so very clearly required by companies today. So what are the options? Well, companies could de-densify, taking more space for each person in the office, but I'm pretty certain that is not what they will be doing. Companies could keep the same amount of space they have now and accept very low utilization. Companies could move to smaller space, but spread out usage over the 5 days. Companies could timeshare an office with someone else, where they only occupy on certain days of the week. Companies could move to a private office with a flex operator that allowed them to spill over into shared spaces as required. Or companies could work up their own hub, home, roam strategy, where they keep a smaller but most likely much better central HQ, which employees visit sparingly, whilst also working from home or near home or wherever by taking out membership with one or more networked flex operator. The key takeaway is focusing on less but better, more flexible space. How do companies make this upheaval work in their favor? Well, first off, the most essential technology they must employ is to survey their employees. They need to ask everyone how things worked for them before the pandemic started. What was their commute? What percentage of time did they spend in the office? And what did they do when they were there? Meetings, desk work, presentations, what? Then companies need to find out how working from home has been for them. What has worked well? What has not? What do they need? How do they score the overall experience? Finally, they need to ask them what they would want after the pandemic. How many days would they want to be in the office or home or elsewhere? What type of spaces and equipment would they need? From all of this data, companies can then work out what space they really require, what equipment they need to procure, physical and digital, and also what corporate policies they need to implement around schedules, meetings, and documentation. All of this will be an iterative process. So generally speaking, companies should take their time, collect data, and take care in analyzing it. Ultimately, a distributed company is a different animal to an office-centric company. Almost certainly better for everyone involved if you get it right. And technology is at the heart of everything. First off, you do need to ensure the environmental conditions in your building are being monitored in real time and systems optimized accordingly. How much air is being recirculated? You need to know. You need to aim for as much touchless technology as possible. Building entry, lift operation, doors, taps, meeting room booking, and so on. Materials used within the workplace need to be antimicrobial wherever possible. Cleaning needs to be regular and preferably automated. But the most important technology for the workplace of the future is that which allows you to understand the wants, needs, and desires of each and every employee, and that provides you with quantitative and qualitative data about how well your real estate strategy is enabling them to be as happy, healthy, and productive as they can be. That's the aim. Making it happen requires humans and machines to work together. You'll never win unless you can do that, as all the smart people in PropTech realize. Now, all of this represents a significant change in the nature of demand within the office sector. And of course, wherever such things happen, there are winners and losers. Perhaps the biggest winner is the customer, which is something of a first for the real estate industry. By rethinking how much space they need, where they need it, and how they are going to use it, companies should be able to win on two fronts. They should be able to utilize the space they do occupy more efficiently and effectively, whilst at the same time providing better, more flexible arrangements for their employees, who in turn should be more productive and more satisfied with their workplace options. The landlords who win from this new world are those that can provide flexibility to their customers, that have a network of spaces to offer, and who put together an ecosystem of suppliers that enables them to satisfy more of their customers' needs. The big losers will be those who cannot provide any of this, and there will be many that cannot. The key point is that a landlord needs to be able to offer customers optionality. It will be very bad news if you cannot offer optionality. Creating this optionality will require PropTech solutions up and down the value chain. And we are talking about all of this being required over the next 12 to 18 months. Without the forcing function of coronavirus, this would have been a decade-long process. A good example of optionality in practice can be seen in the hub on Causeway, which is a development by Boston Properties. It will contain long-term office space, short-term space, flex space, household amenities, and residential units, amongst other things. Real estate asset classes are morphing. This talk may be focused primarily on the office market, but truth be told, what is an office today? Right now, it's probably your home. This time is different. Everything really is changing. What people want in the future, no, scrap that. What people demand in the future will not be what they wanted in the past. They are living through a truly global event. They are seeing how what happens in one part of the world can impact on another. In many parts of the world, people have experienced environmental conditions unlike anything they have experienced before. For the first time in many decades, people in northern India have been able to see the Himalayas from 200 kilometers away. Many of us who live in cities have breathed clean air for the first time in a long time. All of this is giving us a better understanding of how we, the human race, affect the world around us, and how a more sustainable world is both possible and a requirement. Hence the great PropTech flywheel. Our built environment needs to be safe and healthy for people to work, rest, and play in. But to make it such, we need to embrace a broad, deep, and pervasive notion of sustainability. The imperative and the opportunity for PropTech in this situation is therefore immense. Very short term, it no doubt feels to many more like a heart attack. But once the immediate dust settles, you will see the technology in real estate landscape has been utterly transformed. We are all aware that throughout the built environment, from design to finance, construction, operation, onto sale or lease, the use of technology to remove friction and to enable discovery is mostly suboptimal. We do not do much in real estate very efficiently or very effectively. We waste energy. We generate horrendous amounts of carbon. We don't collect much data, and that we do collect is often not put to much use. The critical point, though, is that we know how to do almost everything better. We could dramatically improve the performance of this industry. We have the tools, the capabilities, and the technologies we need to do so. Not at scale, but around the globe, there are solutions to most of the known knowns of inefficiency and waste. To date, the issue has been incentives, isn't it always? As a whole, the industry has not had the incentives to bother to put to use all the tools in our toolbox. 10 years into a real estate bull market is no time for innovation. It's just not needed. And that's not even a criticism. Business people have been optimizing their businesses very successfully for the world as it has been. But today, all of this is out of the window. Our commercial assets are largely empty. In many instances, this might be the case for a while. But worse than that, our customers are not going to return until we can prove to them that they are safe and healthy places to be. They are now acutely aware of the dangers of the environmental conditions around them, of the importance of good hygiene and cleanliness, of the very air they breathe. Now, landlords in historic market downturns always pull out the same playbook: reduce overheads, cut capex, minimize expenditure, hunker down, survive. But that won't work this time. This time is different. The lack of demand is not a cyclical market issue. It is an existential health and safety one. Plus, as we have seen, the chain linking work and the office is gone. You will not be able to cut your costs to get through this. This time, the only way through the crisis will be by spending money on upgrades to ventilation systems, on new materials, on new hardware, on new fittings and furnishings, on new cleaning regimes, on new cleaning processes, on communication, on data, on analytics, on interactions with customers, on increased staffing, on new business models and new ideas about what constitutes the office and even work itself. In a sentence, everything that we know we should have done over the last 10 years, but have not had to, we need to do now. That better built environment we so often talked about, well, now is the time to build it. So, to conclude, there was a lot of change already underway. Technology is relentlessly changing the nature of the work we do. AI is becoming commonplace. We are moving to a human plus machine world. The form factor of offices is changing. No more office as spreadsheet, where everyone was sitting at a desk or cell doing something structured, repeatable, or predictable. Flexible work is becoming the defining characteristic of the workplace, where we are working in different places and spaces and buying services on demand. The income of a building is becoming more than just the rent, and new KPIs are becoming the norm: sustainability, flexibility, health and well-being. User experience is becoming what really matters in real estate, and brand is starting to equate to value. The operator matters. Passive investment is still possible, but low risk is equating to low reward, and space not suited to this new world is losing value fast. The asset matters. Fundamentally, the real estate industry is becoming about more than real estate. Industrial assets are set for long-term growth, but how to profit? Most of the value being created is in services. And most likely, The retail apocalypse is set to continue. There are opportunities, but it's a hard, complicated market. But now, welcome to 2030 in 2020. Coronavirus has shrunk the decade. Things that would have taken 10 years are now likely to occur in the next 12 to 18 months. Distributed working will grow. The only question is to what degree. Demand for space will decline at a macro level, but demand for space will grow at a micro level. Those assets best suited for flexible working and operated at the highest level will be in high demand because there won't be that many of them. Operating space that provides a great user experience is not easy. The purpose of the HQ office will change. It will be about we, not me. About places to work with others, not for individual work. That'll best be done elsewhere. The HQ office will be somewhere people want to go to, not somewhere they need to go to. And the fundamental purpose of an HQ office will be to make people healthy, happy, and productive. And everywhere, space will become more human and data-centric. There will be no success without flexibility. The more flexibility, the better. Companies will take less space and officially for less time, but they will want better space and they will pay more for it. Sustainability and indoor air quality will be a significant competitive advantage. Much of the real estate industry will remain unsustainable and with poor environmental conditions. Quality will outperform. To thrive to the maximum in this new world will require owners, operators, and occupiers to align their incentives. The adversarial nature of real estate is a dead end. And finally, asset classes are set to overlap, to merge or morph into one another. Work and life will increasingly be one, and we may work at home or we may relax at work. These are difficult times, but rich in opportunity. The future will not be an iteration of the past. This time is different. Make the most of it. Thank you.